Welcome to Castle of Paint. My name is Ian, and today we're going to be painting a misguided aristocrat. This of course means the Legendary Count Dooku. I have the Star Wars Shatterpoint model, and we're going to give it a great paint job. Before the paint job, I look over some reference images I can find online to determine what colours I want to use and what recipes I might need. I can always add my own spin to a colour scheme, but for a pre-existing character, I like to keep things close to the original material. After I have my research in mind, I take a look at the miniature and decide on the angle of the light sources. As I rotate the Dukester here, you can see I have primed the whole model black and use a light grey to hit him directly from the front. This is to give me a guide for where should be brightest on the miniature. I imagine he's walking into a lit room through a dark doorway and is about to throw down some lightning. The secondary light source that I haven't done a spray for is his lightsaber itself. The amount of glow these give off vary depending on the source material, but I want to consider this when I do the blade later. All the prep work is done, it's now time to lay down some colours. I like to base everything on a miniature first so I can get a feel for what the end result will be sooner rather than later. It also allows me to game with a semi-painted mini if I don't finish the process in time. For the Dukemeister, I go for his cloth clothes and cloak first. From our reference images we can see that his cloak is a brown, dark red, black. So I choose Vallejo model colour Burnt Umber. I also use this as a base colour for his belt, as this appears a kind of browny yellow in most of the reference images. His tunic, trousers and boots all look to be black, so they get base coated with Vallejo model colour black. The next biggest thing is his skin. The Count is an old white dude, so he gets a base tone of Citadel Bugman's glow to build on. This adds the red into his skin that we want later. The consistency of my paint was a bit too liquidy here, so I mix another batch and apply some more layers. The final touches are some Vallejo metal colour gunmetal grey onto the hilt of the distinctive lightsaber, and the bling that secures his cape. Then some Vallejo model colour white grey to base coat the lightsaber blade and force lightning. Oh, and I forgot. His silver fox vibe means I add Vallejo model colour light sea grey to his head and beard. Any mistakes that I make along the way with the base colours I'll clean up. To get Count Dooku onto the battlefield, he's going to need a base, and then he's ready to look down on Jedi and zap people. For the base, we'll use my Shatterpoint base recipe. Anything that is sandy gets a mix of Vallejo model colour red leather and Citadel Baylor brown. This mix never has to be exact, as we're using it for an organic thing, and variations make bases look more real. Anything that isn't sand gets a base of Vallejo model colour neutral grey. I then paint in the shadows. The shadows for the sand is red leather mixed with some dark blue grey, watered down to run into the recesses a bit. And for the grey I use watered down Vallejo model colour, dark blue grey. If I get some shadow colour in the wrong place here, I'll tidy it up before I move on. To brighten the details, I will dry brush on a highlight. On the sand I use Baylor brown mixed with a teeny bit of ice yellow. For the grey I use straight Vallejo model colour, medium sea grey. No mixing. Normally, I would show a spinny of the mini and say it's good to add to the table right now, but this is Count Dooku and he deserves something special. Also, the lightsaber and the lightning itself, they need a little something. So let's get to the midtone. We're once again going to start with the big bits, and this time I think I'll go with the robes. We have 3 separate sections for the black bits, and we don't want them all to look the same. We want them to all look black. So I'm going to differentiate the way we layer up. For the boots and the tunic, we are going to add some blue to the mix. I'm going to mix the same black from before with some dark blue grey used on the base and apply this as a glaze over the black, leaving the pure black anywhere that a shadow would lie. The bits under the cloak, the folds of the fabric, and under the arms. For the trousers I add instead Vallejo model colour German grey. This has a tad less blue, and I'll keep the blue out of it when we add further layers. With my mix I apply it in the same way as before. With all these steps, it's important to consider where the light is coming from and ignore the bits where our imagined frontal light source would not hit. This black now has a bit more depth, but it's not enough by far, so I add another layer. For our blue blacks, I'll add some more dark blue grey into the black, and also some Vallejo model colour Prussian blue. Here more water is mixed in to make a thin glaze so as not to overpower the black. This is then applied onto the areas where our light source would hit. For our grey blacks, I use pure German grey as a glaze onto the edges and upper folds of the fabric. Here I should move on to the cloak, but I kinda get a little bit ahead of myself. I add some Vallejo model colour white grey to my mixes from before, and add a first highlight to the folds of the cloth. Here I'm trying to apply only on edges as too much of this brightest paint will change the whole vibe of the colour. Next it's time to do the browns. If we take a quick look at the reference image again, the brown I use is already pretty close to what we want the stuff to look like. So this color will be on mid-tone, meaning we want to add in a darker shadow color. To do this, I add some Vallejo model colored purple and a tiny bit of German grey to the brown. This is then glazed into the recesses on the back of his cape, the recesses on the belt and the underneath where the shadow might be. With some darkness added, let's add some light. I mix my mid-tone color with a tiny bit of Citadel Ushabti bone and then add this to the edges of the brown areas. Here it's very important to check the light sources again. Most of the upper side of the cloak won't be hit by the light, but all of the front of the belt will be. I do 2 layers here with a tiny bit more Ushabti bone the second time. Let's do some quick wins. For the metallics, I take my base color and mix in some Vallejo metal color Duralimium, and I do a quick edge highlight over the metal details. For the lightning, I take Citadel Contrast Talazar Blue and paint it all over. For the lightsaber blade, I use Corn Red and paint a thin line on each of the blade's corners. I take my brush to a certain angle and then pull it up the blade, again considering that I want white between 2 red lines in the money shot. Now we move on to our last section for his midtones, skin and beard. For the skin, I take Citadel Cadian Flesh Tone and mix it into the base Bugman's Glow before adding it all over the skin, leaving the darker colour in the recesses. Like the cloak, our beard colour is already kind of what we want, so I'll mix in some dark blue-grey from before and paint stripes into the recesses. This will give us our shadows and allow the beard some depth. Here we have the good count done enough that I'd be happy to put him onto the table. Throw some black paint onto the rim and we can take it to the battlefield to lead droids and zap Jedi. But someone as distinguished as this needs more care. Let's do some highlights. At this point I like doing a new wet palette, change my water, that kind of stuff. As before, we start with the blacks. I remix my last colour, then add some more white grey into the mix. For the tunic, I also add some more Prussian blue. Now we're on the highlight step and the colour is very bright, so we need to be very careful with the black. I put lines as thin as I can manage and only onto very select areas. We really do not want to overload on these colours. Because we're being sparse, this step is pretty quick. I follow up with even more white grey added to the mix and do some final dots to the very brightest bits. The process is repeated for the grey black, but I don't add any of the blue to the step. For the browns, I add 50-50 of our base burnt umber and the highlight colour Ushabti bone. I add this colour to the very edges of the me and any area that is facing the light source, but is flat, gets some scratches of this colour. I'm trying to simulate texture. A quick stop on the metal, I take pure duralinium and hit some high points. For the lightning, I take Vallejo model color Andrea blue and draw some lines over the base blues. I then use Vallejo white grey and do the same process, but smaller, thinner lines and towards the top of the lightning. The pristine haircut of our boy needs more depth, so I add some white grey to the medium sea grey and add lines in the direction of the sculpted hairs. I then go again with pure medium sea grey around the temples and the tips of the beard. Now it's time for the face. I don't really know how to make him look old, so I'm gonna paint it like a normal for Caucasian and then pray to the internet to help me make him an old dude. I get my base tone, some purple, the Cadian Flesh Tone, and then finally Citadel Kislev Flesh all onto my wet palette. What follows is some highlights up by continually mixing the colours brighter and bringing it down by adding purple to the base and glazing it into the places I want some shadows, like inside the ears, in the eye sockets and under the cheekbones themselves. I think next time I'll start with a less red base tone. Try and do cooler colours, make the skin a little bit grayer and less warm. The final touch in this step is to get my brightest red and trace the lines on the blade of the lightsaber. This model now looks really good, but we have a few final touches to really give it some style. Let's first finish the face with his eyes. He has brown eyes, so we start with white grey into the sockets and then do a dot of burnt umber. Finally, a dot of black. A steady hand and a prayer is always needed during this step. The next bit is some OSL, object source lighting. We have both the lightning and the saber. The last time I did this, I used thinned down contrast paint to throw a filter over the areas where some of the glow would hit. The bits of the model that get this light on them will be the darkest parts of the light, because the light source itself is where the bright stuff is. I started this with Talazar blue, and then for the lightsaber blade I used Citadel Contrast Flesh Terror red. Picking where the light would hit here is always a fun task. After this step I give Dukes a matte varnish and then he's ready to show off. watching this video. I hope you enjoyed seeing this come to life. Stay tuned for more, and for everything else, you can head to castlepaint.com.